So welcome to the Node.js Node API team meeting for April 9th, 2021. We'll follow our standard approach of looking through the issues that we have in milestone 11. And but before we start that, does anybody have any announcements that they'd like to make? If not, okay, we will move on to, I will share the screen with milestone 11 and we can start from there. So the first tagged issue is renaming an API to something more appropriate and descriptive. I know, Jim, you've been pushing through a number of the tasks there.
Yeah, and I need to make the time to work on those tools. So when I've got free cycles, that's the next thing I'll be working on.
Sure. Okay.
I think what's labeled, I think that is complete.
That's what I was thinking. So yeah, so should we check that one off?
Yeah, we should check that one off, Michael.
Perfect. Okay. Okay, that sounds good. If there's nothing else to talk about on that one, we'll move on to the next one. If I can get back. Okay. The blog post about the transition to Node API. I know I haven't had a look. We've got an outline. I wonder if we should do something like schedule like a time to actually go through and work on that together or something to make progress. I know I've been super busy, haven't had a chance to look at it. I don't know if people have an idea of what a good way might be to make some progress.
How did we approach the last blog post? We each took sections.
I think that was, yeah, I think that's right.
Would that work here? Like this is an outline already. Yep. Could we take sections?
I think that's a good idea.
Which change non-in reference has been. But it all really depends on if it's a lot to work on. I expected not the approach. Because I feel like if one person were to take like what's changed and what did not, I feel like that's one unit of things, and then maybe one unit is the background discussion of like why we're changing it, maybe linking to the issue that started everything and paraphrase that or something like that. And I'll take the approach maybe.
Okay. Yeah. That sounds good.
Because I have free cycles this weekend. It's not a holiday to celebrate now.
Okay. Sounds good.
What were people thinking about the tools? I'm not clear what that.
I think it was just like what's left. So sort of, this is like, hey, this is how far we are and what's left to.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I could put some stuff out there about what's left.
Okay. I mean, I don't think any of these sections are particularly long, so.
Right.
Okay, so why don't we try that? At least that way, when we get back, we can. It'll be good. I know that I'll have a reminder to. If nothing else, it'll be a reminder next time that I should spend some time, a little bit of time. I don't think any one of these should take a huge amount. So.
Right.
Okay, that sounds good. So let's move on to the next one. Let's look at the stale issues. I don't see any new stale issues, which is great. Let us look at the issues for things that have been ported. I don't think there's anything new there, but let's just take a quick look. I see we're trending downwards now. So I don't know what's up with that, but who knows? I just always flip over here and see. Yeah, that's okay. So it's, I don't know, I look at that and say, okay, something's going on with the repository overall, right? Because I'm not sure that Express has gone down by 3 million downloads a week. Anyway, okay, so no point, I don't think, thinking too much about that one. Let's go back to what's in there. I know I haven't reviewed the external examples, and I don't think Gabriel have had time. I haven't enabled debug for testing, so we can move on to burning down the issues raised by module owners. So node add-on API. Are there any ones in particular that people want to sort of call out? Things that we should talk about?
Yeah, I have one pull request that's quite a long time doesn't receive much reviews. It's on the node core repo. The
Okay.
issue, the pull number is 365 and 10.
Okay, so 365, 10.
10.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
Let's say I think there are some issues raised also in the comments, but the PR is quite don't have any changes through a long time, so it will be great to have people reviewing it.
Right. So this is like, I guess, I think we were going to, there was like at least from my perspective, it's like to try and make it unbreaking, which I guess we have here.
Yes, that's been changed. So
that's already been changed. Okay.
Comment. Yeah, right. So
okay. So it will be it'll be opt-in, right? Is the
yes, and so in the first version, let's say the major version, the option is opt-in. So we can, like say, in the next major version, we make the opt-in by default. So people would have to opt out. Is that correct? If I recall correctly, we have a discussion of the adoption policy on the future path.
Right. I guess we'd want to see like how breaking it was, but yeah, we can at some time in the future, we could flip the default from one to the other if we're kind of like convinced it's not going to cause any grief to people, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's one that, yeah, I'll go back and it wasn't on my radar. If you've done all the updates and it's opt-in, I think that I'll go back and do another review. Thanks for bringing that up. I'm gonna leave that one over here as a reminder. Okay. Any others that we should bring up?
There was the your PR on node add-on API for the fatal error of throwing when you can't throw.
Right. I don't think that
902.
902. Sorry, 9.
So SRC fix the crashing.
Right, that one. Okay, right.
The original person, the original poster, made some comments.
Yeah, this is a good one to discuss.
Right. And so last week, we also discussed this. And so what the poster is suggesting here is basically we would really need it to go on core. And then that's what Gabriel said here, because the node add-on API end is just a wrapper around the core object.
Right, and I think we kind of figured we couldn't do that in the short term, right?
Right, so he responded here. I didn't really process this last comment yet. In case it is probably best adding 1 minute. So to me, it sounds like the behavior that we have in this PR is okay, But we just then had wanted to put it behind the compile flag, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like,
Okay.
you know, at least I think that's still where the disagreement is. I think, you know, previous times we discussed it, we kind of agreed that like that having the option to have that behavior, we can see making sense, but it should be opt-in because there's sort of a trade-off, right? Like if it would be kind of a, I know what I'm doing, or, you know, I know that this is the right thing to do versus the, oh, I'm just going to hide these things automatically, right? I'm not sure if the original poster, like if Rudolph agrees with that. Like, I think he's still arguing for it should be on by default. But I think from our previous discussions, it seemed like the consensus of the group here was more that like we'd prefer it to be an opt-in versus just automatically, you know, squelch those things.
Right. So if we go to the files changed,
Mhm.
then because the fix is really small. So that pretty much, that right there is the fix. Are we thinking about putting that behind like a defined compiler flag then?
Yeah, and I think that that fix wasn't quite enough. What my proposal or thinking was, I think if I remember correctly,
Oh, right, in
was
that comment you made.
right. Uh, so is this
Th-
one where something
Right
like
here.
this, right?
Yes, this one.
So doing that, but then also adding in a guard which would say, you know, you can opt in to basically having it just eat the exception, and you'd have to opt into this happening versus it always doing this return, right?
Right, that's the place that would be opt-in.
Right.
Okay. That if else block. Okay.
Yeah, is that the one?
I
Yeah,
think that
maybe that one. Yeah.
wouldn't it be the internal one from if status is internal
Yeah, I think
pending,
this one. Yeah, that makes sense.
and then else status is an API pending exception, like that is if else.
Yeah, so if you, right, okay, you'd have to turn that into a, like, if it's,
Because the old behavior, what we want is we throw status and then just go to if defined NAPI CPP exceptions, right?
right.
And then the new behavior is that that whole if else block.
Yeah, it basically could be like if you, I think it's maybe just a define that guards that, like if you opt in, then it returns. Otherwise, it doesn't return and it'll fall through and throw the exception,
Right.
which will
Okay.
be a failure. Yeah. Okay.
And we need this to be a compile flag, so that would be going to the node get file, right?
I think that would make sense. Like
The
it needs to
binding
be,
get.
uh, does it need to be in there?
Well,
Like it's basically like if defined X.
right. Like how do people right now say that they want to use like the experimental APIs? Because I
Right.
feel like it
Yeah,
would
go
be in
ahead.
the same boat of how you would say that I want to use this, right?
Right. It could be something as simple as putting into your code, like the thing that does the include. Before that, you put like a hash define, you know,
Gotcha. Okay.
suppress blah, 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 and this will check that, right?
Yeah, there's multiple ways to
Yeah.
get a define. Right. Okay. That makes sense. So I can take this then.
Okay.
And we wanted to try to get this in for Would we want this to go in for the first release that we want for next week?
I guess that, I mean, that's a good question. Is it like, do we want this to be supported with older versions or that people have to move up? I guess there were two things. One, we haven't done a release for a while, so it would be good to get a release with new features, and especially since if we're gonna make the next one Semper Major. I could go either way, to be honest. Like, I don't think we would necessarily have to block doing those releases on this, but if we're ready, it wouldn't be bad to include it as well. I don't know what other people think on that front. I mean, I'm coming from, it's always been this way, right?
Right. What else do we have that needs to go into the first release?
That's a good question. Let's take a look at.
I guess we can start talking about that now.
Yeah, that's worth looking. Okay, so release. So I don't think so. This one would be nice.
I tried to look into this one a little bit. I looked into the code. I didn't see any problems in the code. I had a suggestion randomly that's like, what if we flipped the order of the tests to run the typed thread safe function ones first? Because the implementation for TSFN and typed is a little different, but the tests are the same. I'm wondering if we switched them and we also see errors. Would that help any?
Yeah, would understanding if it's
like if it's in the test or not. I don't know. Right. Because I guess it's hard because it's intermittent. So it could just be that all of the typed ones will always pass and fail in but like I'm not really sure how else to troubleshoot. Because I haven't had any. I've also tried running locally and I haven't. Because you said that this was a failure on OS X. So I was like, oh, well, interesting. Let me try on my Mac.
Okay, so you've tried on OS X, because I don't, not as well set up to do that. So it's, and I ran it a long time, like 1,000 iterations. And I'm kind of like, I don't know, I'm like half, is this an issue with our testing versus something that we've introduced? Like, since it's on, I mean, have we changed the TSFN implementation since the last release? I go back to, like, we don't have enough history to tell, is this something that we've introduced recently or not?
We can look at the blame, maybe, to see what the last change was.
That's maybe a good idea.
Let's see. Oh, but it has all of the formatting stuff. We did a copy constructor change. And a support underlying calls directly to the, Yeah, I mean, I don't see anything big. And adding ref and unref.
Okay, but that does, none of those match to where we're actually seeing this first.
No. And a change for adding error checks. So no. Remove erroneous finalizer cleanup. Maybe And this one. Let's see. PR. So pull
Yeah,
request 636 deals
Okay.
with finalizer deletion on node add-on API. Pull 636. And it's closed, yeah.
Yeah, I'll just go to 636.
But I also don't think this would cause that problem.
Yeah, it's annoying that it's so intermittent and we can't recreate.
Yeah.
Because like it's been 3 days now where the nightly runs, there weren't any. But then there's just looking back over the
Yeah, that's the end. I don't see anything else.
just trying to find the build number. Why are we? 303.
Is there some way that we can get the CI to produce like a crash dump file or something that contains stack trace info, or maybe, or like print out stack trace info when a seg fault happens? I don't know,
It's
like readme
probably
debug
possible,
symbol.
but I don't, it would take yeah, it'll take some time to figure that out.
Mm-hmm.
And it's yeah. And I guess we see it, like I see it, this last one looks like it was on, if I could actually get through to completed. Is that the one? Yeah, it happened on Fedora as well. I wonder if yeah, I think it's like until we can recreate it locally, we're gonna have a hard time, that's for sure.
Right.
We could try changing would it make sense at all, I guess, but in the, I don't know if like it's any more likely to happen on the CI machines as anywhere else. We could consider doing releases in a different order. Like we could agree to do a release that just drops support for node 10 and then agree to do one more release for the 3.x line once we figure out, like once we're ready. It was just sort of the idea was like, let's get one last 3 release that has, you know, most of the up-to-date stuff because it's been a while, and then do a 4 to drop support for 10 around the time 10 goes out of service. But there's nothing to say we can't do a 3 release after we do the bump to 4.
That's true.
Maybe we should see if we can try to, I don't know, like maybe we should try some more. If a couple of us try and run this in a loop for a long time and see if we can recreate it. And then next week we can figure out, because the node doesn't go, like node 16 doesn't come out until the week after next, right? So maybe if we spend the next week trying to recreate it a bit more and then decide. Does that make sense?
Has it been exhibiting itself on Mac?
It has, yeah, it has failed on OS X. It's failed on Linux.
Okay.
Uh,
Yeah, I could try running it on a Mac OS 10 instance.
yeah, that would be good. I'll try and run it on some more on Linux. And we may also want to focus on, I've seen it 14, 15, just looking at past failures. Like we may see it more on 14. Oh, that one's, yeah. Unless there's two different things going on there. So, okay, so yeah, why don't maybe let's do that for this week, is let's try and see if we can reduce it, because that's the only one that I think, if we look at, let's look, are there any other ones we think we absolutely want to get in? I think, Kevin, the other one, like the throws JavaScript exception, if that's done in time, that would be good. I think the rest of them are all, you know, let me look at the add iterator for object. Is that, I think that one, there's still some discussion going on there, wasn't there? Yeah. So at least for me, I think I'd be fine if we could, 906 is the only one that makes me pause versus anything else. Anybody, are there any others that people think we should try and get in?
I see nothing.
Okay. So we'll leave it as, let's do a little bit more of a push at looking at that 906. And then we'll check in again next week just to see what we should do in terms of like a release to drop support, a 4.0 release to drop support. But sound good?
Yeah, could I get just a quick orientation on how to set up and run the tests?
Yep. It should be just, if you do an npm install and then npm test. I don't know if Kevin on Mac, is there anything else that needs to be done there?
Nope, that's it.
Okay. I mean, I did try in some cases to run subsets of the tests because they run a bit faster, and to do that in the
you can run directly the JavaScript file for the test in the test folder by doing node and then test / all the way to the test file that you want to run.
Yeah. Yeah, and that means that you don't rebuild it, because running npm test rebuilds everything.
Mm-hmm.
You can also run just the index file, because one thing I like in trying to recreate it was like, is it some combination beyond just that one test that's going on?
Right. It could be some intermixed, because we do have a lot of async stuff happening. You know, it could be just that we do a console log to say that we're running this test, but it's actually happening from a previous test.
Right.
So it is better to run the full test suite. That is correct.
That is, yeah. So that one, if you run the index, like you do an npm test once, it'll build everything. And then if you run node, and then I think it's test/index.js.
Yep.
That will run without rebuilding, but run everything.
Yep.
Okay. All right.
And then, you know, I guess if we recreated it, then the challenge would be, okay, well, now if we can at least recreate it at some interval, then we could try and run it under the like a debug compiled version, that kind of thing.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Which gets slightly challenging sometimes because like we're launching new processes and stuff. I think in like I think I'd also modified the index.js to not spawn a new environment, because otherwise your debugger would, you know, you would run the debugger on the outer process and not the process that's actually crashing.
Right, because it has to add the garbage collector argument.
Right.
So if you do that, it shouldn't spawn the new process.
Right. So I hacked out the spawning and like, yeah, manually added the, and depending on which test you're running, you may or may not need that at all. Okay, so we'll do a push to see if we can recreate that. And Jim, if you have any, like, if you start to run things, still have more questions, just let us know and we'll, through email or whatever, and we can help.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay. Just, I have a couple pull requests to add, like the project uses the DCO, so we should have, we should present the DCO. So I was just adding that into our docs and stuff. I was going to plan to land that unless anybody has any concerns.
None here.
Sounds good. Just look to see if there's any other. Right, I think we talked about that. And then Node.
If it's available, I would like to talk about the pull request on the Node add-on API. Its number is 927.
Okay, let's do that.
Yeah, so we have been talked about this once earlier. So I've almost completed the source changes, and the left one is making existing tests to be compatible with maybe or maybe not enabled. So the most of the API are compatible between the maybe enabled and maybe disabled, but some of them, like say, we are accessing the object properties with the bracket, since that would not return any things on failure, so it will be very kind of impossible to return any maybe things except throwing. But since when the C++ exception is disabled, that will be very impossible to let the developers aware that the bracket accessing is throwing. So in these changes, I've made that bracket throwing, bracket accessing, the error being a fatal error if the maybe is enabled, and to make it a, but I didn't find a alternative that is reasonable to properly handle the exceptions. And the PI is kind of seeking for reviews and for feedback.
Okay, so this is the one where, right, so you can enable the maybes, yeah. Yep, and
so the ultimate thing is that there are users that don't enable C++ exceptions, and since then they are unable to ergonomically to see that if there is anything thrown in JavaScript, since they don't have any means to let compiler checks the value is empty or not, since the value wrapper with the Boolean or number object is the same kind with the value wrapped or nothing is wrapped. So the maybe kind is just maybe type. Just make sure the compiler checks the return value, and if you got the maybe or value is an empty maybe type, then there is definitely a JavaScript exception is pending for processing. I believe that's kind of very common in Node core, and we have to process these exceptions properly to have the program very robust. So this PR is majorly for the add-ons that when the C++ exception is not enabled.
Right. Okay, and this, yeah, so I mean, Kevin, here was an example of what we did in another case to enable it.
Right.
I think, like you know, if that's, so we're gonna have node enable maybe, and then that guards what that particular thing is. And I guess like these all like this maybe or value returns ends up being nothing if it's not enabled, right?
Yeah, it's a alias if the maybe is not enabled. Yeah,
Right.
it's right.
Sorry, I think I was just above there, wasn't it? No.
Yeah, right.
Right.
Let's see.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Right. Okay. So you basically like us to take a look. You said that like there was one problem with the test.
There is no problem in the test.
Okay.
I have to work with these existing tests to be compatible with maybe, so we don't have to write test duplicated for the maybe enabled or maybe not enabled.
Right. Okay.
The problem is that when we accessing object properties with brackets, that's say the bracket operator.
Right.
So there is nothing returned with maybe, so we cannot first check with the bracket accessing. So I made it and you can search with operator and bracket.
So is that like?
Yeah, that's it. That's the definition.
Right, but the test somewhere. Okay, here.
It's the bracket assignment. You can say we assign a value to a bracket. Just
I'm
like,
looking for like where's okay, so like it's like a test.
It's hidden by the GitHub. You have to scroll to the top and click.
Ah, this one. No.
Yeah.
But I was looking for where in the tests you had to change it.
It's unable to test it since it's not gonna be compiled. Maybe I can just add a test that it can.
Okay, I thought you were trying to get it so that the test would run both ways.
Yes, I'm trying to get the existing test run both ways.
Right. So, but then did you have to modify the tests at all, or I was just looking for a file in here.
Maybe you have to add a, like say, macros to around the existing tests so that we can make both patterns happy.
So my understanding is that this PR introduces the maybe change, behind the compiler flag, but since the tests don't work, we don't use the compiler flag at all right now.
Currently we just enable the flag in a small subset. That the subset is the thing I've just added.
One.
It's very small subset.
Okay.
That one, right? Okay. And then, so because you said the problem is with the bracket operator, because we have the ability, the shorthand to say like object bracket string equals something, and
Yeah,
that
right.
assigns something, and that doesn't work with the maybe.
It can work if the exceptions are not thrown, but if the exception is thrown, then if we are expecting a very strict exception handling, then that exception might not, like say, is leaking from the maybe design.
So, but I guess it's like, I'm wondering now, like, so what do we expect if we can't get our tests to work? Is it that, you know, like we'd have to change all the tests to make it work, or that, like, because then that means it's like it's a big breaking change to anybody who enables it, right? Versus or is it, you know, how would like somebody who's upgrading to say I want to enable maybes handle this case?
They have to check that each calling to JavaScript isn't throwing any exceptions, or they have to properly handle those exceptions. So, like say they can add a trailing dot to checked, and that will assert that the exception is not throwing, and then you will get all of the following sequence just like before, but you have a manual force check on the return
Right.
type.
So can we do something similar to what we did with, you know, in the enable, maybe is to have that to check be something we add to all of our tests, but when you're running without it enabled, it, you know, it ends up being nothing.
Yes. That can work, but I may explore the semantics if it will turn, like say, make it harder for people to understand what's going on here.
In the tests and stuff. Sure, yeah, that makes sense. But that might be a way where, you know, we can update all the tests so that we do get the proper testing, and it can run both ways. And the other advantage is, like, if it's not confusing, it would also be a way where we can show people what they should be doing, right?
Yeah, right.
Okay, so maybe if you could take a look at that, because I think it would be good to, like, it'd be good to be testing that version, since it seems like it's, you know, the people will have to do something slightly different.
Great.
Okay, so well, maybe before I take another look, if you can explore that and let us know. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Great. Any other ones that people want to bring up? Let me just do a quick look in the node. one is.
Ah, right.
Yes, we
Second
talked
pass
about this
callback.
briefly last
Okay.
week.
So is this related to the PR that you've been working on, Legendikas?
I think so. I have submitted a issue to V8 so that the V8 is saying there are folks commented that V8 can add a cancellation token to the wake callback info so that we can cancel the second pass callback so we don't have to wrap around it. But that will take another long term to land.
Right. So that, I mean, because you have a PR already, I don't know which, I guess is that PR which I reviewed and I think you were looking at landing. Do we think that's going to potentially address this one?
I can double check it,
okay.
But since the second pass callback is very likely to be the one.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Right there. Okay. Yep. Maybe just paste on here that PR might be related.
The number is 38,000.
Oh, right. It was exactly 38,000, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Okay. So we'll say not that one, this one.
Oh, well, taking a look into the second pass callback, I've just noticed that there are, let's say, set immediate in node core on the finalization of node API finalizers.
Yep.
So while I'm testing the second pass callback, I've noticed that this set immediate have captured the environment reference. So when in the environment teardown, the immediate is not canceled and the reference is still there, and that caused a crash. But I didn't replay it. So maybe I think that would require another turn to just say dig into the finalization to see if we can promote the steps before the environment is properly actually being tear down so that we can get the chance to properly run users finalizers. Maybe I will submit a issue later so that we can check that issue.
Okay, so that's a different issue, unrelated to this one?
But the cause is very similar. That is to say, we are running users finalizers in the environment teardown. So we didn't. But the finalizers are very tricky. Like say, we have to defer the finalizers to be run so that the GC is properly handled. So I'm thinking that if we can promoting these finalizers, tear down finalizers so that we can properly code the users finalizer. But that's require another exploration to see if that change is valued.
Okay. So that would let more code run properly, right?
Yeah, and
right.
If the finalizer is definitely to be promoted to before the actual environment teardown,
Right.
then it is safe to call any arbitrary JavaScript in the analyzers, and we don't have any issues with the cannot call into JavaScript issue, right?
Right. Yeah, like it'll improve. Like today they would fail, but not necessarily cause a crash. They just wouldn't run properly. But making that change could improve the amount of code that can run correctly, which makes sense.
It's very odd for developers to observe this cannot call into JavaScript, right?
Right.
Since they cannot take any actions to alleviate the issue, it's very, very odd.
Yep. Yeah. No, okay. So that makes sense. So, but this one here is ready to land, right? From your perspective, is.
Yeah. But I think it may be great to have Gabriel to check out it.
Yep. Yeah. No, definitely. This is a tricky place. So having more eyes, the better.
Yeah.
Okay, so did that cover what I guess we were looking at ones here. So we looked at this one. You're thinking it may be related to this other one, so we'll see if
I can check out it later.
Okay, perfect. Okay. This right. I don't know if there's anything new to talk about that. I guess that's sort of a longer thing, I think. Okay. I don't know if we've ever thought about that. So is anyone working on the NPM team to add a package of syntax to restrict installing a node add-on only for a given greater NAPI ABI version? So basically saying I only want to install this if ABI version X is available, right?
Yeah, so that you may not install a add-on with Node API 8, but you are on the API 7.
Right. Yeah, let's see.
I think it kind of makes sense though, because I remember when we were doing like the node add-on examples, I was adding a thread safe function test. I had to put in the package JSON engine greater than or equal to, and then I had to look up when was Node API 4 released and what version was that, because that's when it was introduced. So I had to look up that instead of just putting 4.
And you have to, like, say, list all the 3, even 4 LTS lines for the version, right?
Right.
That's tricky.
The thing is, I don't think like the engines isn't usually a runtime check, is it?
It's
I don't know. I guess a good question, like how do they do the check for the node version for engines?
I think it's an install check.
Yeah, it's an install check.
But like it basically
NPM install
says what version of node, like does it do a process, like does it run node to figure out what version of nodes in the path?
Against the node version that is running the NPM.
Right, okay.
Yeah, there's a couple of things that you can put in your package JSON to restrict it. Like you can also restrict it for operating systems and things like that. But for this specific use case, I think it really makes sense. Because then you would just put, for example, you would just put in a Node API 4, And then if I'm npm installing on version 3 or something, the npm install would fail.
On a version of Node that doesn't support. Yeah, that's interesting. So what do we want to, I'm wondering if they're like interesting in making the proposal, or should I ask, like, sound like an interesting idea? Are you interested in proposing?
The work is required for npm and the other package managers, but not in the node core, right? There's nothing to do in node core.
Right. Yeah, I don't think there's anything to do in node core, right?
Right.
Okay, well, we'll ask, because if they're interested in proposing, we could support / but we'll see what they say. Okay, we are at time. So is there anything else that we should discuss before we close out? I think if not, thanks for everybody's time, and we'll see everybody next week. Thanks.